Just take for a moment and imagine your life, and you find yourself and you're struggling to forge deep relationships. Maybe you're feeling trapped in some self-sabotage and it's really hindering your progress. So the concept of living your legacy may be distant and really unattainable. Then we have to look at how we're defining success are we defining it on our own terms, or have we defined it on somebody else's term? So we're going to explore all of these in today's episode of the Revolutionary Man podcast, because we're going to offer you a lifeline. So we dive into the insights of a really remarkable guest whose expertise and positive outlook can provide a roadmap overcoming these challenges and so many more. Now, before we get into that and into today's episode, let's come to grips about something else. And that is, inevitably, there will come a time in our lives when we will hit a wall. Whether it's a marriage that's not working, or a career or business that's stagnated, or maybe your personal life is just flatlined. And so if you're tired of dealing with any of these or a combination of them, then allow me to help you get clear on what needs to be done, how to do that, and so you can get on living the life you were meant to live. Just go to the show notes today and book a clarity call, and let's get started. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. So before we get started, allow me to ask you a couple of questions. As we dive into today's conversation, I want you to think about your own life. And are you forging the deep relationships that truly matter? Or are you letting distractions pull you away from what's important? And then I want you to consider your daily habits and your mindset. Are you living your legacy and defining success on your own terms? Or are you caught in this cycle of self-sabotage that's preventing you from reaching your full potential? It's a scenario that's all too familiar for many of us, and getting clear and real with where we're at is more important than how we get there. That's just the never-ending rabbit hole when we consider about how we got somewhere. So we don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But what is important is taking charge of our lives, moment by moment. The only way we can do that is and say that we are thriving. So how do we get to that point? Well, all we need is a little bit of guidance. And today my guest intends to do just that, as he spreads a few breadcrumbs on the trail to thriving in our life. So allow me to introduce our guest. Selig is an accomplished entrepreneur, coach, scoutmaster, board member, and a roll-up-your-sleeves conservationist. Rand shares his expertise and extensive expertise in his book, Thriving: How to Create a Healthier, Happier, and More Prosperous Life. And with an MBA from Stanford and undergraduate degrees in mathematics and psychology, he's going to excel at managing complex projects, not just locally, but globally. And he's relentless positive, and he believes that he can design his own life just as you can too. So welcome to the show today, Rand. How are things, my friend?
Hey, Alan, it's just great to be with you. After that lead up, I should
Well, we're going to
make this
spend
a
more than 2
2-minute
minutes together for
drill.
sure today, my friend. I was so intrigued with your story. And as you know, here at the Revolutionary Man podcast, we talk a lot about everyone being on their own hero's quest and their own journey. So I want you to take us back into your life, a time in your life when you knew that things just had to change. What did you do about that? And how did it shape you into the man you are today?
Well, I think one of the most important decisions I've ever made in my life was starting my own company. I'd been working for big firms, big Wall Street firms, for a dozen years, and I was feeling very uncomfortable, itchy, frustrated. I had a boss who basically said, if you want to go to the bathroom, raise your hand. This is after running the entire Asian investment banking business. So this was insulting and frustrating. And I have the most amazing wife. She put up with me coming home every night for about 3 years, saying the same stuff, slightly different story. But I decided I got bored hearing myself talk about this stuff. And I worked with a coach, a life coach, who was a self-paced program, asked me lots of really great questions. Who are my heroes? What were my strengths? How did I, see myself as a moral entity, in addition to having talent of whatever kind? And what that confirmed was I was not going to be a forest ranger. No, I was going to stay as an investment banker, but I was going to run my own firm. And so I got really busy with that. And on day one,
Mm.
starting my own firm, I had 5 clients, and I've never looked back. It was truly a fantastic, painful period of time, but I came out of it smelling like, well, I think like roses. And I again have to thank my wife so much and this great coach. Boy, oh boy, I'll be forever thankful
I
for
bet
him.
for
He's in
sure.
heaven now, but
And I'm going to have a question on
I think
mentorship
of
in a
him.
little while. But what I really like about your story so far is really talking about, paying attention to the things that are happening to our lives, and how often are we caught in the rabbit race, and we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it becomes a little bit like Groundhog Day, and we lose ourselves in our ambition, and we lose ourselves in wanting more. And so I'm grateful that you found that. And I think, maybe I want to get into your book actually and talk about your book titled it Thriving, as I mentioned earlier. And you tackle a lot of the things that I talked about in the opening of our show today, about how we define success and stopping self-sabotage and forging relationships. What inspired you to write Thrive, and what do you hope that readers are going to get as a takeaway from the book?
Yeah. Well, the background story is that I'm a very disciplined person, and since high school, actually, I was writing notes about from books that I had read and collecting articles and collecting great quotes. And I had this 4-foot high stack of papers, and I kept looking at this stack, thinking, well, there's
Mm.
at least one book in there, and there's at least one book inside me. And so 4 years ago, I started writing this. I chunked the 4-foot stack into files, which ultimately became the chapters. Originally, I thought the book would be great as a legacy thing, that I would, give it to family and friends, dear friends. And I shared it with 3 people who know me well. Several had written books, and they said, oh, no, no, this is a
Mm.
much bigger book than that. You have to share this with the world. Get out there, finish this book. And so it's quite an adventure. It's my first book, um, an enormous adventure. And if you're not prepared to learn things along the way and keep pushing forward, it'll be a struggle and you might not get there. But I was committed. I really believe in this book. Um, the central theme of this book, if I'm going to distill it down, is that we have enormous power in our lives. The power to get on the road to thriving by making choices about how we spend our time, choices about who we spend our time with, choices about our habits, and choices about our feelings. These things all roll up, and you can do the hard work of looking at yourself and being honest and say, I need to work on this. And this relationship is
Yeah.
not serving me. It's actually taking me backwards. Maybe it's toxic, but it's not working. I need to make changes. You need to add new people to your life. These are all choices that we make. So I think this leads to the confidence of uh, designing your own life. I've done that, and as you mentioned at the outset, Alan, I believe other people can too. And related to that, now that I'm actually a published author,
Yeah.
I can say you can be the author of your own story, which is, I think, a very nice set of words put together. But
Right.
what it basically means is that you can decide what to edit, you can decide what to delete. It's your story. And then you can decide what various scenarios are going forward. Look at those, write
I
them
just love
down,
that,
and
how you
then
frame that.
make them
We can
happen.
be the author of our own lives. And we forget that the next chapter is up to us to decide on how that is going to be written. And I think that's why it's so important that, we were talking just as we were getting on to hit record for today, is that what I enjoy about doing this podcast so much is, one, meeting some outstanding people such as yourself. It's also about, seeing average and ordinary folks doing extraordinary things. And more of us, I think it's more inspiring to see that from the average Joe, so to speak, than maybe seeing more I would consider maybe the icons that we would all look up to. And that, you know what, you don't have to have a superpower of anything other than maybe the superpower is being able to pay attention and make choice. So that leads me into asking and wanting to, how do you define thrive, and what kind of aspects make that up in a human?
Well, as I lay out in my book, I think if you're truly going to be thriving, and by the way, thriving is the climate. It's the average over time. It's not today's weather. So, and anybody can have a bad day, and that doesn't mean you're off your game forever. It just means you're having a bad day. So, thriving is an average over time. And I think about sort of four components, four basic elements to thriving. There's thriving personally. There's thriving with others. There's thriving out in the world, and there's thriving as we move ever forward in life, which includes gaining wisdom and evolving. Each of these are really rich. The first part of this, the thriving personally, is half my book. It's so foundational. If you don't have a really solid relationship with yourself, for example, how can you have a really great relationship with others? So it kind of builds outward that way. If you're all about yourself, you talked about defining success your way. If you're only about yourself, what are you? When are you going to be charitable? When are you going to be philanthropic? When are you going to be helping somebody else? Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's sitting on a board. Maybe it's volunteering. My wife and I are volunteers at our local marsh. And our technical title is we're environmental stewards. And my wife laughs and says, we are weed pickers. Get over yourself. I say, you're right. But we're doing important work there in a marsh that matters a lot. It's on the flyway with birds and so on. So doing all these things, and you don't have to, I think a lot of people think that they have to finish one whole set of things. They have to do their work and be with their family, and they don't have time. They don't have focus to do the volunteering or to be charitable. They're saving, and I really want to push back hard on that. My own experience suggests that you can do many things well at the same time
That makes
by
complete
focusing
sense to
and
me, and I
by
think
having a
it is about
commitment
that.
to
I think
those
we
things.
tend to put a lot of pressure on how we're trying to show up with in life, and if we feel that we can't make, at least I'm saying using the royal we here, but if I think about it for myself, how much time can I dedicate to this, and then I'll discount it. And so one of the notes I wrote down here was work-life balance, and that seems to be this idea of trying to have things in balance. And what are your thoughts, and in your journey, what have you learned about what work-life balance means?
Well, let me just start off by saying
Yeah.
I don't love that term balance. It sounds to me like a teeter-totter. It's this sort of zero-sum game. You're working, and when you're working, you're not with your family, and when you're with family, you're not working. And I think that sort of one or the other kind of thinking is a bit of a trap. Instead, I think it's important to say what's important to me as a human being on this planet. Uh, who's important to me? What are the issues that are important to me? And what am I going to do about that? And then you can build out. So you have to be healthy. You have to be physically healthy. You have to be mentally healthy. You have to take care of yourself. So that takes time. And as you get a little older, or if you've had some kind of accident or some other physical setback, or maybe a mental setback, you gotta spend extra time with that. So there's that. There's, of course, I think it's important to have a sense of spirituality. It's more
Yeah.
important, in my view, to have a spirituality than it is to have a religion. Spirituality leads to being in awe.
Mm.
You look out, you look at this amazing world we're living in, and then it leads to humility. Like, you're a little bit of a nobody. You're a little tiny grain of sand on the planet, and to say nothing of how insignificant you are in the universe. Being in awe and having humility go a long way to just keep going and doing your best, and not getting over yourself thinking, well, this is going to be a big headline grabbing thing. That's not what it's about. uh, I think having purpose, really spending time with yourself, saying, what is my purpose? I have had purpose. Again, I may be a little bit unique in this regard, but I've had purpose and written it down
Yes.
and revised it a number of times since high school. And I recently gave a talk at a local retirement home, and I was talking about the 9 keys to aging well, and one of them was purpose. And I said, if your purpose here in your 80s is to just be a kind person, to ask questions of somebody, to listen well, to invite them to do something. You are having mighty purpose, and I salute you if you're doing that kind of thing. So there's a multiplicity of things. Being one of I've had more than 3 dozen roles and responsibilities and titles in my life. It's been amazing. But I think the most important,
Yeah.
the one I care about the most, was being father and raising my kids. They're fantastic kids, and my role has shifted again and again because they're so independent, and they come back to home port from time to time, and I'm delighted, and they're delighted. But I did my job, and I worked hard at that, being a scoutmaster and little league coach, and being home for dinner,
Yeah.
except when I was flying to a client or something. Um, when they were little, I read to them every night. These kinds of things make a difference, and it's not a difference necessarily just in my life, but now it's going to be a difference in their lives and in their children's lives. So this is the balance I'm talking about, the integration, actually. I should scrap the word balance, the integration of life and being authentic, being yourself. And being yourself means that you screw up once in a while, and that's okay
And
too.
I love
Just
that. There's
admit
just
it
so much
and learn from your
great information
mistakes.
you put there. And like the first thing I wrote down was your question: "What's important to me?" And then you were talking about humility and purpose. And when guys come and do work with us here at the Awakened Man, one of the things that the first thing I get them to do is through an exercise that ultimately crafts their mission statement with what it is that they're willing to stand up for. And because a lot of times we don't have that. Like, we think we have a purpose, but our values aren't necessarily aligned with that. What
Yeah.
where actions show up are different than what we say that we value. And I think it's really key. And then you talked about also in that whole part of it about what was important to me. And I think about a tool that we use, and I wanted to get your thoughts on what you're using with your clients, is that we get them to go through using the Eisenhower matrix, on a week to week basis, and then they can have a look at it. Well, if you know what your purpose and mission statement is, and I agree with you 100%. I encourage them to redo it every year, to realign with it, get it sharper, and then how are you actually showing up? Because it's in the moments to moment that really makes a difference. And so, what are your thoughts on some of this?
Well, this is important work, and I completely agree, and I'm delighted that you're doing that, Alan. Thank you. Um, words are words, but until they really have traction, they can just be feel goods. So, applying yourself and getting the alignment you're talking about is absolutely key. I think for some people, if you dial forward get away from the here and now, go forward 10, 20 years, or maybe even towards the end of your life, and then figure something out and pull it back. What do I need to do now to get there? It's actually one of the
Yes.
key ways in which we do professional forecasting. Shell Oil is a master at that kind of approach. And so one of the things I like
Ah,
to talk to people about is writing down their legacy. So what do they stand for? So, what you want to do is carve your name on hearts, not on a piece of marble. No. So what is your legacy? What are you all about? And and once you have that, you can go through many drafts, and it's okay. You can revise it, as you say, you revise
yes.
it annually, however often, but then start living it now. And I don't care. I don't really. It doesn't matter whether you're 35 or 55 or 75. This creating a legacy. And I will just be happy to share my four-part legacy. One is a legacy of excellence. Everything I do, whether it's relationships or work or commitments I make, I'm gonna do it in the best way I know how. I'm gonna follow through with people. I don't let the ball drop. A second thing is having a legacy of purpose. I'm clear about my purpose and I revise it from time to time. My purpose right now is engaging people with my book. Well, that wasn't my purpose 4 years ago. That's great. It's livening. It keeps me young. It's just really great. A third
And-
is to be encouraging, a voice of encouragement for everybody I come in contact with. Uh, and there's lots of ways to do that. You could do it in a more formal way, like being a mentor, or maybe with a friend who might be unsure about something, but just look at them, you know, openly and tell them what they're doing well and why you believe in them, and be encouraging, being positive in that way. And then my fourth, which I'm very excited about. Some people kind of snicker and say you spent too much time in
mm,
Northern California, but it's being love. And we hold love in a kind of Hollywood way. It's romantic. It's all this. And we have words like you fell in love and you fell out of love and the one and only love. And that kind of romantic love for Valentine's Day and other days of the year. Oh my gosh, that's great. If you have it, I'm so delighted for you. But there's something even bigger. I
mm,
would say even more important, which is
yeah.
love is a way of being. And that means being kind and being respectful and asking questions, listening hard again, being generous, uh, performing acts of loving kindness, whether that's with Mother Nature, with animal, with other people. When I go to some place, even if it's the first time and I don't know if I'll ever come back, whoever's serving me, whoever's there at the
Yes.
counter, whatever I engage with, I sometimes ask their name and I thank them for what they're doing. And especially if they do a great job, then I call them out. I say, this was terrific. I just want you to know. Yeah, I'm leaving you a tip or whatever, but
Yeah, it makes complete
that's
sense.
not
And
the
what I
big
think,
story here.
what I really took away from your four-part piece there is, and you used the last part, and you talked about love. And last month, that was the theme of the month for us guys. Is we use I have 12 different virtues. We follow one a month and give an opportunity to work through it, kind of like the Ben Franklin model. And one of the things that as men I find is that we struggle with receiving love and actually giving love. We don't know how to do that
Yeah,
because it wasn't something that normally we did receive. And I don't know if you're finding that in your work as well, but that is a really
yeah.
big subject today. And sometimes, showing love also means being able to be honest with somebody, but still giving them the space to still grow. And that's a skill that more of us as guys need to learn.
I'm totally with you. There's a great line. I'm sure you've heard, Alan. We
Yeah.
we accept the love we think we deserve, and this is a problem. This is a problem because if you don't really love yourself, you're seeing the dings and the bruises, and you're recognizing that you made some mistakes, and that you were not the nicest person to whomever.
Yeah.
And you don't get through that, you're carrying heavy rocks in the backpack, and the mountain just gets higher and higher. So you just have to say, I'm going to fix the problems. I'm going to go and apologize. I'm going to forgive myself. There's certain things I do control in life, but there's a lot of things I don't control, and I'm just going
Yeah.
to be the best person I can. I'm going to commit to being a better person tomorrow or in the future than I am today. You want to compare
Yes.
yourself
Yeah.
not to
Completely
your
agree
fellow
with
man,
that.
but to
And
your
that's
former
it
self.
makes so much sense because so many times we are competing, or we tend to, as guys, we tend to compete with something else that probably, depending on where we're at in our life, it may or may not be attainable. But what is attainable is being better men as we continue to grow. And, there's a term they use in a lot of 12-step programs, and that's, progress over perfection. And I really like that idea because it is about, just, and you
Oh,
used it, excellence. And excellence to me is also that idea of looking for what I'm doing well versus looking after perfection, which is, if you're chasing perfection, then you're always looking for what's
yeah.
wrong. And it's a subtle shift, but I think it's really important.
Well, if I get around to writing another book, and I'm so busy with this one
Nice.
and enjoying it so much, I'm about to do the audiobook and read it myself. But it would be about words that are troublesome and difficult and set us back. And one of those words is retirement. I think we should get rid of that word. We should change it at the minimum to rewirement. I think that would be really cool. I mean, it's kind of fun to make that shift. But there are other words that get in our way, that hold us back and limit how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world that we exist in. So there's a series of those difficult, troubling words. You were just referring to one a minute ago, and
Yeah.
you just got to throw that stuff away and say, I'm defining this my way. I'm willing to swim, put my swimsuit on and
Mhm.
swim against the tide of society or my family or friends, and just get on with this, because I believe in it. I believe in it. And um,
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to evolve as best I can.
Yeah.
And another of the bad words is this idea of perfect. And I hear it when it relates to things like a wedding. And I go, "Oh my gosh, this is not good, guys. It's great to be joyful and happy and all those heart-opening
Well,
things,
even
and it could be excellent in so many ways, the food, the service, the formal wedding part of it, but perfection, don't go
that's
there.
so true. That's so true.
You'll hurt
Really,
yourself.
what we're talking also about is why we struggle a lot in our lives is that we have self-sabotage. We ultimately squash the goals and the aspirations that we have. And so,
Yeah.
in all the work that you've done, especially preparing the book and that, what are you finding some common signs of self-sabotage, and what can people do to start to overcome those?
Well, my first taste of self-sabotaging was actually in college. I was One of my degrees was in mathematics, and I was a tutor and became the head tutor. And so students would come in, and within a minute, they would say they're not good at math. And I'd say, well, come on, let's work together. Let's do some problems, and we'd solve the problems. And then they'd gain some more confidence. And I'd say, why don't you try one on your own? And eventually they'd get it solved. And I'd say, how do you feel? And they go, math is fun. And that's an example of self-sabotaging. When you say you don't even get into the game, you just hold yourself back. I'm not good at this. I'm not going to apply for that job. I'm not going to follow through with Alan on his very nice invitation because he's just blowing some smoke my way. He doesn't really want me to be on his podcast. These kinds of things. And even if your chance of succeeding is only one in whatever, 100, don't blow that off. I just self-sabotaging is one of the three
Mm.
arenas of
Yeah, I completely agree. And
not
it's some of
being
the work that
emotionally
we
healthy.
spend a lot of time looking at how we do that to ourselves. How are we self-sabotaging? And I find that it's coming from limiting beliefs that we have with ourselves. And it comes from a misalignment. And again, I'll go back to the misalignment in our values because we end up by acting out uh, in opposition of what we truly desire because we don't believe that we can get there. So there's this disconnect that we end up by
Yeah.
having. And so you talked about what's one of three key areas. What are the other two?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So another one is this forgiveness. Things happen to us. I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't feel like somebody somewhere along the line, maybe long ago or more recently, did something intentionally or unintentionally that was really painful, hurtful, and they haven't been able to forgive that person. So I say you have to forgive them. You can't carry that weight around. Be honest with yourself. Did you do something to participate in it, like a 1%, 3%, 5% contribution? Yeah, maybe they own the vast majority of this and they do owe you an apology. You may never get one. And maybe if there's a little bit of a role you played, maybe you can open the door by apologizing to them. Not taking full ownership of the whole problem, but that honesty could be good. And even if they're gone, they're no longer in your life or they're gone off the planet, you can still write a letter and ask for them to apologize to you or for them to forgive you for your role in it. And the other part of it, of course, is forgiving yourself. You know, I don't know a person who's walked around who hasn't made some kind of mistake. And the trick is, again, to be honest about it and then learn from your mistakes so you don't repeat them and that you just
Yeah.
go forward without that heavy burden. So that's number two, the forgiveness. And number three is one that was, I got to tell you, is the hardest one for me, which is learning to let go. Why was that hard? Because I held my life in this way of I was in control. Oh boy, Scoutmaster, be prepared. My clients running very, very complicated transactions, step 1 through 23, boom, 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 on schedule. I was in control. Well, what I realized, and I realized it only as my children became full adults and very successful ones, that I realized I was controlling four things. I was controlling my attitude. Wow, big. I was controlling the amount of effort I was putting into things. I was controlling my behavior, and I was controlling my actions. Those things I controlled, and I can continue to control those things. Those are in my bailiwick. But there are all these things outside of that, dealing with other people. And yeah, I can maybe be of influence.
Yeah.
And say if I screw that up, then I lose my influence. So, and there are lots of times when there's no voice I have. I'm just not there to have a voice. I have no control over the situation. This is true of, for example, national policies or
Right.
events or elections. These things are out of our control. That doesn't mean we don't participate in certain ways, but realizing this learning to let go. I actually like to do a little exercise, Alan. Maybe you want to do it with me. I say, hold up your fist and hold on to something that you want to let go of. And it may have been there a long time. Maybe it's more recent. You see your white knuckles. You're holding on so tight. Okay, now turn your fist over. You again see your white knuckles. You're saying to yourself, I want to let go. And then I joke, maybe because you read Rand's book, Thriving, you say, I have power and I'm going to let go. And now you open your hand, you wiggle your fingers, you wiggle your thumb, and your hand rises because you've let go of this heavy weight. And it's a little exercise that's kind of fun. I used to have to do it a lot. And now I don't have to do it so often because
Wiser,
I'm a
I'll
little
say.
more humble. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So
Wiser.
you had
Yes,
attitude,
thank you.
effort,
Thank you.
action,
Yeah.
and what was the fourth one? Behavior. Yes. Yes,
Behavior.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are
Which is
four
different than action, of
really
course.
crucial takeaways. And one thing we didn't get yet a chance to talk about, we talked in the intros about forging enduring and deep relationships. And again, I find in my men's work, that's one thing that we struggle to do well as men. We don't know how to really forge deeply, although we fall in love deeply. How to maintain and grow that relationship can be a struggle. So, what have you found? What are maybe some tips or some secrets on forging deep relationships?
Well, it's a very personal story for me. I woke up, I don't know, 10 years ago and said, wow, my life is just terrific. This is a great life. What could make it better? And I said, what would make it better? I have lots of friends, know lots of people, but I could have a few more really deep, enduring relationships. And so I said, okay, all right, who? And so I picked 6 people. They happen to all be guys, although I have many female friends too. And I said, okay, I'm going to go talk to them. What am I going to talk to them about that's different than all the other conversations I've had? Well, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to tell them about something I'm concerned about, something I don't have an answer to. Maybe I'm worried, anxious, and see, just share it. And if they have some advice for me, I'd love to hear it. And I said, okay, it's possible that the needle won't move with one or more of these people, and it's possible, although I
Yeah.
quickly dismissed this, that somebody will say, "This guy's a real flake. I'm getting out of here." Well, what happened is 5 out of 6 moved the needle a lot. One didn't seem to move at all, and that's fine. I was prepared for that. But the other 5 began sharing not only great advice and insights and perspective, but they began being vulnerable with me, and the relationship shifted into this depth that is so important at any number of times. You had the joys, the confusions, the sorrows that we all go through at various times.
No,
Not
absolutely
alone.
not. And it's one
Being
thing that,
alone is
it's
not a fun thing.
a big reason why I wanted to start doing men's work was just through my own personal experiences and finding that, this lone wolf idea, it just wasn't working anymore. And I needed to find that place. And unfortunately, there wasn't a place for guys to go that they can be vulnerable and talk about stuff. And sometimes these are things that you just can't say to your spouse and your partner. And because you've never done it before. And so you
Right.
need that environment. And that's why we started
Yeah.
doing this work, was to give that space. And so that, really leads me into, talking about what another topic that you like to talk about, and that's strengthening our emotional health. And, and I think that maybe it has a little bit to do with learning how to let go, but tell us a little bit about how we can strengthen our emotional health.
Yeah, well, we talked
Mhm.
about that a minute ago in these 3 things that I think are really so key, and there may be others too. No, it's not there may be. There certainly are a variety of other things, but I think there's so many people I've come across. I've met hundreds. I can't count the number of
Yeah.
people I've met where I've had a conversation where they are self-sabotaging, or they're holding on to some resentment. When you don't forgive somebody, there's a great line, something like, not forgiving is like drinking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die. This is not good stuff. So you got to be the forgiving, reach deep to do that, stop self-sabotaging, and learning to let go. Those 3 things, if you can really get on top of those, your emotional
Yes.
climate will change a lot, assuming you're struggling in some way, even if it's
Yeah, I
a
completely agree.
little
And
bit of grit
we
and
need a little
dust
bit
in
of
your
grit in
eye.
our life. It's how we, the thing with grit is it gives shape to things. It helps us change and mold ourselves. And because I think, if we sit in life where we're not challenging ourselves, or we're not being challenged, then where's the growth truly coming from? And I'm a big believer in that. We need to have that little bit of chaos to help us grow and rise up and find out what we're truly made of, and move forward in our lives. And so, obviously, go ahead.
Well, I think one element to this that's is so
Mm,
important is to position yourself to be a lifelong learner. Being curious is makes life fun. I mean, you think about some adventure you took. So maybe it was a vacation. Well, what made it fun was learning new stuff, seeing people dressing differently, or speaking differently, or eating different food, or whatever. The adventure of
yeah.
life. So being curious and being a lifelong learner is huge. It really helps also in conflict resolution. So, why did I bring that up? Because think about a time when you were really kind of face to face, locking horns
Yeah.
with somebody because they had a point of view that you did not share. You were getting kind of hot under the collar, and it could have hurt the relationship a lot, depending on how you handle it. But if instead you decide, I'm going to be curious, and you just sort of pull yourself away from the immediacy of that, and you start asking questions. You say, hey, I'm curious. You just said this, but tell me why. What led you to think? You don't say that stupid that thought. How could you be so ridiculous? No, you don't say that. Instead, you say, I'm
Yeah.
curious, but mean it, and ask them what they're all about. It doesn't mean you have to change your view, but you might learn something if you're actually honestly listening, and it preserves the
Yeah.
relationship. Maybe it's just a topic you don't go to anymore. That's okay. But being a lifelong learner
Yeah. I completely
pays
agree.
such
The
enormous
challenge
dividends in
is to
life.
continue to learn and to grow. And so, obviously, you were mentioning of a 4 foot stack of notes and quotes and everything. And so you've read a book or two in your life. And so not sure if you're in between books or if you have something on your nightstand today, but if you were to think back on a book that was really impactful for you, what was that book and what was the impact it made on you?
Well, that's a hard question because there's so many. And in fact, in my book, one of the things that people have told me again and again they love about my book, over 200 5-star reviews of my book, is that the back of the book I have by chapter
Nice.
my favorite books that I've read that really impacted me. And they cover all the waterfront, from environmental stuff to money stuff to aging, on and on. It just covers this waterfront. And for me to pick one of those books here, let me just see if I can
Mm,
pick. Oh, I'll pick one. It's Essentialism. I'll actually pick two. Essentialism is one. It's a great guy, also a Stanford MBA, Greg McCown. And what he taught, the subtitle of the book tells you a lot. It's the disciplined pursuit of less. And he talks about that same theme in like 15 different aspects of life. And one of them was on strategy. And I said, oh, I don't even know if I'll read that chapter. I'm a strategy guru. Well, I read this chapter. I said, wow, I learned a lot, and I'm going to be applying it, because it's not the top three things that you're
right.
going to do. It's the number one thing you're going to do. And so that's a really good book. And the other one that came to me at this most amazing time
Yeah.
was called Positive Intelligence. This book is again, subtitled something like "Why Only 20% of Individuals and Teams Achieve Their Potential,"
Mhm.
and it's because they're doing a lot of sabotaging. There are these. He talks about these saboteurs that come along the way. There are a dozen of them. The king of the saboteurs is judgment. And when I read this book, I was so full of judgment. I was so cocky. I was so full of myself. Oh, I know how to do that. I'm smarter than that guy, so whatever. Well, that got in the way, and the judgment saboteur has a co-companion, and this book helps you figure out who the accomplice is to judgment. But the really juicy part of this book is there's another part of our
Mm,
brain, a different part of our brain, that is our sage selves. and it tells you how to pull away from these saboteurs and go into this really rich, helpful arena of being in the sage self. It's a great book. So those would be two, but depending on your mood, there's many more
Well,
that
that's all
I
right.
would
Those are
refer
two
your listeners
outstanding
to
books
at
for sure.
the back of my
You know,
book.
we started off this podcast talking about a mentor. You talked about a mentor that was really impactful in your life, and he's no longer with us at this time. But what was the best piece of advice that he gave you, and how is it still serving you today?
Well, Daryl said a lot of things to me over the course of about a year. I met with him probably 8 or 9 times for an hour or two at a session, and I had to prepare for him. He gave me homework, and I had to come prepared. Um, he said a number of things. He said, "You are enormously talented, but if you're going to be a square peg in the round hole, you're going to feel a lot of pain. So you just need to figure out, make the hole bigger, or or
Great.
find something that fits you. This is the alignment point that you're making." And he said, "For you, Rand, it's having your own company. You are so disciplined. You have a lot of talent. You have a lot of experience. You're ready. You're really ready to do it. So do what you would ordinarily do. Get ready. Build up some clients. Be sure you know what your focus is. Know what you're able to do, and offer it honestly and with excellence. And you're never going to have a problem." So that was one. The other is within, I think, the
Wow.
first meeting, he said, "You have a problem with your father, don't you?" And my mouth flew open. And I said, "Daryl, how did you know that?" And he said, "Well, there were just a couple little tiny things you said, but I know you have a father problem. You are a bull, and your dad's an older bull. And I bet you're just locking horns and being
Wow.
difficult with each other." And I said, "Yes." So he said, "I'm going to recommend a book to you." It's another one of the books I refer to in my book, uh, which is called Fathers. It's a great book written by, I think Osherson is the fellow's name, the author of it. Uh, I learned a lot about myself and my relationship with my father. I was able to diagnose finally, after decades of the problem with him, what the issue was, him being very narcissistic. And I realized I was the person
Yeah.
who had to make the changes. I had to respect him, and I had to be prepared for him never asking me how I was doing or never saying, "I'm proud of you." I just had to say, and I created another father. A friend said, "Write a letter to your dad. Don't mail it unless you really, really want to. But this fake father that you're creating in your head is this father where you just spent a weekend and you had a terrific time. You had great conversations. You had a lot of fun together. So create that father. So you'll now have two fathers. You'll have this father you deserve, and the real father that you can respect and appreciate for gifting you so many things that are part of who you are, and that you recognize honestly as coming from
Ah,
him
man,
and,
just
and
love that. What a
contributing
great way
to the person you are today.
bring us to almost to a close to today's conversation. You know, of everything that we spoke about today, and maybe there was something we didn't get a chance to touch on, Rand. If there was one thing I want our listeners to remember of our conversation, what would that be?
Well, we have covered a huge amount of terrain. Um, I want to come back. I think it's a really big point for people, especially as they're building their careers, is figuring out what is enough and figure out what success looks like. So it needs to be personal. It's not an external yardstick. It's not qualitative. It's quantitative. And when you get your arms around that, you can be you. Then you can be successfully you. Your life will change. You'll be moving around a very difficult corner. You cannot look out your window of your office or out your home window and compare yourself to the neighbor or the boss who has something. or who just came back from this amazing, very expensive trip. That's not what it's about. It's about you looking inside and saying, this is what gives me joy. This is what allows me to be of service, or to be a good spouse, or a good father, or a good neighbor, or whatever it is. And I might not be acknowledged for that, but I know I can see myself, and I can look in the mirror and say, I like that person. And when
Perfect.
I put my head on
The
the pillow
question, what
tonight,
is enough?
I'm going to
And
sleep
helping
well.
to use that question to help define what success looks like in all aspects of our life. And so, Rand, I just want to say thanks so much for spending time with us today and showing us how we can truly move from surviving in life to thriving. So, if men are interested in getting a hold of you, picking up your book, participating in any of the work that you're doing, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, there's two ways. The big Goliath on the planet for books is Amazon. Of course, my book's on Amazon. It's also at the independent bookstores, Barnes and Noble, and so on. But you can also go to my website, the book website, randselig.com. And there's a lot of information in the book, including other great podcasts. I'll add yours, Alan, because this has been such a terrific one. There are my favorite quotes by chapter. You can have that as a free PDF. There are 6 amazing testimonials. I mean, these are blockbuster. The head of Kaiser Permanente wrote a testimonial for this book. So
Oh,
there's a
perfect. Well, I'm
lot
going to
of
make sure that information's
great
in today's show
material over there
notes,
at the website
as
as
well as a
well.
link to your book, so folks can get out there and pick up a copy. I just want to say once again, Rand, thank you so much. I just loved our conversation today.
Alan, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.